I am now at this third section, machine humans, and at this point, essentially, Vonnegut, at this point in our narrative, because it's chronologically, I've to some extent, organized these lectures chronologically so that we end with the firestorm, which is sort of what Vonnegut does as well, right? In the sense that the firestorm is the most dramatic thing that's going to happen, and he puts it towards the end of the narrative. It isn't the last thing that happens. But what happens to Vonnegut himself, the author, and then to his characters, certainly to Billy, is that there's a deep sense of fatalism that surviving brings. That, why did these particular men survive? And we we really don't know. I mean, we can say that they survived because they were in the Schlachthof, the slaughterhouse, and the underground, essentially, bunker of the Schlachthof, and that they were presumably far enough away from the center of the firestorm that the ground was with them. We just the thing about this kind of event is that it just comes down to basically being lucky that you are here and not there. And the same thing sort of proved to be true with the atomic bombings, where were you behind a wall when the bomb burst? What were you wearing? Were you wearing white? If you're wearing white, you probably were going to survive. If you were wearing a pattern kimono, you probably wouldn't. The pattern would be burned into your skin and so on. So there's a very strong sense in Vonnegut that, and he begins to work on this idea that if you treat human beings in an industrial way, they sort of become industrial beings, and that there's this artificial weather that he talks about, which Edgar Derby, he's talking about how there's metal knives are falling from the sky, basically, and that what you're dealing with then it's a universe of machines and not human beings. So you can see why Vonnegut would come out of this war and begin writing what we would look at as science fiction, and that's how his first books were classified as science fiction. And he's going to give probably his greatest hero, Kilgore Trout, the job of being a science fiction writer, and that's in many ways, as I say, this is why Trout is perhaps if there is going to be a hero in Vonnegut's world, it's probably going to be Kilgore Trout. And he's going to extend this idea of people have become machines because of the way they've been treated by machines. He's going to extend this in Breakfast of Champions, 1972 novel, which will pretty much just cement him as being one of the most important writers of the 60s and 70s. And that's it. After this, he just moves into the elite of the American literary world. But in Slaughterhouse 5, he has the Tralfamadorian and suggests that humans are reacting machines, that this is how we are essentially programmed. And on 154, Vonnegut, the narrator, says Lionel Merble was a machine. Tralfamadorians, of course, say that every creature and plant in the universe is a machine. It amuses them that so many earthlings are offended by the idea of being machines. Again, on 154. The offense, obviously, of being a machine is that it goes against our protest of free will, that we believe that, we control our futures, we can be great, and we, until this point, really, in the 70s, still subscribe to the great man, what is called the great man theory of history. It really is the great man theory of history, not the great woman theory of history, because basically you say, probably a lot of the history that you've gotten is the history of what great men tend to do, and then there was this king, and there was this king, and then there was this adventurer, and this, and this massive, scientist, as opposed to movements of ordinary people doing things in masses, which is really how history is actually made. But there is this struggle between things being determined or fated and people having free will. Vonnegut's development then of this mechanistic view of human beings, however ironic, does come out. It seems to be just a natural outgrowth of having been involved in World War II. And Paul Fussell, who was a World War II veteran and was just a superb, oh man, what a writer. He's just a savage social critic and satirist. He produces these savage social critiques, which I highly recommend. You might look at, I don't know, if you want sort of the more traditional Paul Fussell writings, to have a look at The Great War in Modern Memory, or his book Doing Battle, which is his own memoir. He has a sort of book between the two, which is about World War II, called Wartime, which is also very smart. Just about anything Fussell does or did was very smart. And he's a beautiful writer. Oh, God. But anyway, he says, if in the First World War you're over one of 4 million uniformed Americans, you're actually pretty anonymous. But if in the Second World War you're one of 16 million, you're really nothing. This is from his book Wartime. And this is what happens to Billy and his group. That they essentially are units, and they're put into the freight car, the stock car, which of course the same cars are used to transport people to the death camps and the forced labor camps. And the guards who walked up and down outside, each car became a single organism which ate and drank and excreted through its ventilators. It talked or sometimes yelled through its ventilators too. In went water and loaves of black bread and sausage and cheese, and out came shit and piss and language. On page 70. So the trains become a mechanism. It's like there aren't human beings in these things anymore. It's like each train car is a living thing. And as I say, the trains are already famous to us, but there's a brain in there somewhere, is the sort of the suggestion. And the body is then also seen as a machine. And this is something which Vonnegut points to in a sort of very kind of dispassionate way. And this book pissed off a lot of people. I mean, it was taken off the shelves. In a lot of libraries, there were big fights over it. People said it was obscene because there's like 3 lines of sex between Billy and Montana. There's the drawing of her breasts, like that. That was enough to have it taken off the shelves because it was obscene, and so on. But anyway, on page 80, Billy coughed when the door was open, and when he coughed, he shit thin gruel. This was in accordance with the third law of motion, according to Sir Isaac Newton. This law tells us that for every action and reaction, and there is a reaction equal and opposite in the equal and opposite direction. This can be useful in rocketry. So it's like Billy is just sick, and so he just coughing makes him shit. But then Vonnegut steps back and he's like, no, let's just make a little teachable moment out of this using rocketry. And, it's like, yeah, it's because the body is a machine, right? And in this case, it's breaking down. So he's offsetting the disaster and the misery and the shame of the body in this completely facetious way, right? Part of the issue that we have to deal with then is this legacy of the body which has been badly shamed,